Hey everybody, welcome back. This week I am talking to Jen Plessis. She is a mortgage master. She helps mortgage loan officers and real estate agents who are overwhelmed, stressed out, that are sabotaging their personal lives for the sake of their business in order to multiply results and things like that. You know, Jen has been podcasting actually for 6 years, helping real estate agents, helping the mortgage world. She started coaching in that world, and we really had a wonderful conversation. This is all about why did she choose to podcast, and what has it done for her business? What has it done for her reach and growing her community and growing her audience? And I wanted to talk to her because she speaks to this world of realtors. And just like lawyers, just like dentists, just like doctors, just like any brick and mortar, I really think that podcasting is a wonderful tool for getting out in the community, building that trust that is so easy to do with a podcast. And I'm very interested in it. And I wanted to say up front too, that I am down here in Orlando, Florida, and I'm actually going to be at the Florida Realtors conference in late August. I have a booth there. So if you happen to be a realtor, you happen to be in Florida, or you happen to be at that conference, please stop by and say hello. So without further ado, here is Jen. Jen, welcome to the show. You have gotten to this point where you have built this wonderful entity, this wonderful platform, this wonderful business that you have. And I want to know how you've gotten here. You mentioned when we were talking before the interview started that you have got a lot of experience in this hyper-focused niche. And I want to know how you got to this point. So could you bring us up to speed on your story?
Yeah, sure. Oh, sure. Of course. Well, I was accepted at Colorado State University for pre-med. I was going to be a cardiologist, and ended up not liking that. So I ended up studying architectural design and construction engineering, which is very similar because it's all math. And at the time when I graduated, I couldn't find a job in architecture because I was a woman. And even nowadays, it's hard whether you're a man or a woman. It's a very tough field. And so I went on an interview for a mortgage company, and I had no idea what it was. I knew that they told me that rates were 18%, and I said, "What's percent?" I had no idea. And so that was in 1983. And I have, 2 years ago, I transitioned out of traditional mortgage lending into coaching and speaking. And I've, of course, been speaking and coaching for about 18 years in that space, but now I'm doing it full time. So 2 years ago, I went full time with that. And so that's what brought me here. And as a top producer in the industry, right now there's 480,000 loan officers, licensed loan officers. At the time when I was in the business, there were 780,000 before the credit crunch and the Great Recession. And of that, I was in the top 200 of loan officers. So what happened was, and being a female in that, given the fact that there were so many men in a male-dominated banking mortgage environment, a lot of people were calling me and saying, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" And that led to the coaching. But then eventually I couldn't run a practice, and I have 4 other businesses as well. And I couldn't run a practice and have these other businesses and answer people's questions. So I thought, how am I going to answer their questions? How is this going to happen? And I had just helped my son launch his podcast. And we learned a lot of mistakes doing it. And so for me, it was easy. We quickly launched mine, and that was my means for being able to answer all the questions that people were asking. And it started off 5.5 years ago. So I'm one of those veteran people. And it was all monologue. And then I started moving into interviews, and I do a little bit of both now.
Okay.
Do a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah, you were telling me that you've been doing this for a while. You've been, you started out doing it yourself, and all those learned lessons that come from that. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how you have used podcasting in your business, and what effects have you seen in all areas of your business from the podcast?
Yeah, well, and it's transition too. I mean, back then, 5.5 years ago, which seems like forever.
Well, it's been around for 14, 15 years. People have been podcasting, but it's come in waves, and there's all these different groups. But if you've been doing it for 5, 6 years now,
Yeah, now we haven't, but it makes me kind of one of these old people. But there wasn't anybody around at that time, or many people. It was difficult to find them, who would do what you guys do, for example, right? Where you help everyone set it up and all that. And I'm launching another podcast here in the next week or so, and I had everybody do it, right? I didn't have to go do it, so thank goodness. But I know the value of having people do it, so that's super important. But and I only launched it in Apple podcasts, right? I only launched it there. Okay. I'm ranked in the top 1%. And then in some categories, I'm ranked pretty high. And, I only had it in this one place. And now I'm in 18 different syndicated places, which is really cool. Maybe more, I don't even know. But, for me, it was from my heart. And I think that that's how we all come up with podcast ideas too. It's a message that we want to share with people. And it came from my heart, like, how can I help these people? How can I use my experience to compress their success, right? And and my failures too, my successes and my failures and what I've tried. And it sort of came out like that. And the next thing I knew, I was getting people saying, hey, could you coach me? I'm like, oh gosh, I guess I could. And I won't even tell you how cheap it was back then, right? That I was like, for, a couple $100 a month. And
we all do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we all do that. And then we go, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Yeah. So I started coaching some people. And then from there, I would get instant messages and emails saying, hey, would you be willing to speak at, this conference? And would you be willing to come to our sales rally? And and because I'm in the mortgage and real estate specifically, industry specifically, it's a very defined niche, right? A very, very defined niche. And because I was a top producer, I have a lot of notoriety. I'm one of the top speakers in that space. So it just became natural that sort of happened. And I have to tell you, although I'm making adjustments, you and I were just talking about some of the adjustments I'm making in my practice now, this year had nothing to do with Corona. Is that last year I had 29 paid speaking engagements, and I don't call anybody. I've only filled out an application once. And so I'm very blessed, but I do know that I need to be searching as well. So I'll start doing that this year, and that's what I'm working on now. But so, lots of speaking engagements, and you become an expert, you become a market influencer when you do podcasting. So I'd say, those are the two biggest things for me. Is it's really grown my coaching and my speaking business.
Okay. Yeah. It's amazing how I tell people you never really know who's listening when you start out. Yeah. And then it's powerful how people not only think of you as an expert right away, but they trust you as not just an authority, but as a friend in a way, because you've really connected with them on a personal level. I mean, once you spend a few hours listening, it's like that.
Oprah. I mean, that's it. I mean,
exactly.
Everybody thinks we're Oprah, and all we're doing is bringing in the people, and that gives us the credibility, right? By itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're doing speaking. You've been in the mortgage industry for a long time, the real estate industry. You're used to being in front of people and looking good and presenting yourself right? And being confident.
Right.
So why did you choose podcasting and put an emphasis on that over, say, YouTube or a blog? What was it about your specific niche that led you to podcasting?
Well, blogs to me would bog me down. Blogs were a bog.
Blogs bog, yeah.
Right? And so I didn't have the bandwidth to write a blog, to write. Now I had written a book, right? I had already, I actually hadn't. I had already had the podcast, and then I wrote a book. And that was perpetuated by everyone saying, well, if you write a book, you get more speaking engagements, which I don't know that I'm a believer, but that's just how it is. So I have a book. And so the podcast was helpful in writing the book because I went back to some of my content, and said, oh, that's kind of good. But blog was never something I wanted to do. I never wanted to have to write, because I know me. even writing the book, if you sit down and I start writing, I start going, it happened one day. No, I don't like that. Once upon a time. No, I don't like that. So it's much easier for me to chat. I'm definitely a talker, and it was easier for me to chat. So that's why the blog. YouTube, early on, it wasn't such a big thing for podcasts to be videotaped and audio, right? It wasn't such a big thing to do that. And so I'm now in the process of really growing my my YouTube channel, because now all my podcasts are that way. But I just didn't go, again, it was timing. Honestly, when I started doing this 5.5 years ago, I was still in the mortgage business, right? Originating business. I would do some of my podcasts just with my phone, and I'll tell you how I started them. It's funny, but with just my phone and my ear set, or whatever they call it.
Earbuds.
Not earbuds, but headset. And I would sit in my car, and I would put myself on mute if a fire truck came by, right? And then I put myself and go, right? It was all audio. So it was much more convenient to do it audio than it was to do video, because we have to be set up. We have to, and so when I transitioned and retired from traditional lending, I said, okay, well, now I can set up a studio in my office and I can hop on anytime. So it really was a bandwidth issue as much, as that. Now for blogs, now when I have my podcast edited, a blog is created for me, but I don't do it.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. That's something we do as well, where we will post the actual episode on a page, but then also take from the transcript a segment and write an actual blog post that is just text. So that's very cool that you're doing that. Repurposing is the way to go.
Now it's all getting done. Yeah, that, and it's getting pushed out on YouTube, and it gets all prettied up and all that good stuff. So
awesome.
I'm getting much more bandwidth, not my bandwidth, but I'm getting much more social media bandwidth, et cetera, now that I've progressed there. But it's a progression.
Okay. Now, so the mortgage industry, this coaching niche that you found for yourself, it is hyper-focused. I wonder, are there other people in your industry that are using podcasts? Are there things that you've seen from other podcasters that you've maybe taken and said, oh, that'd be a great idea for my industry? What are some of the ideas that you've used or you see other people using that you really like in podcasting?
So in and out of my industry, I've seen things. First of all, when I first started podcasting, there were only 4 podcasts in the mortgage space, 4 loan officers. And the 3 that were there were already dead. Right? They were on there, but they hadn't had episodes in months and months and months. And so I was really one of the first ones out there, right, doing the podcast. So there wasn't anyone to really, look at and see what was different in my space. There were more real estate versions of them, and I saw those, and I've been guests on those. Now there are more and more podcasts. I find that some of them are now moving towards, coaching like I do. My podcast is not about me being your coach, although I get that. Right. I definitely get that, but it isn't about me being your coach. It's about me sharing information so you can be successful. And I truly believe that. Right. And I think it's just a byproduct that I get coaching, and maybe one day I'll be on my podcast going, let me coach you. But I find that others do that too much, and I get turned off by it. I don't like listening to it in my space. Right. In my space, I'm not a fan of it. And I've been on every podcast you can be on in my space so far. So that's kind of already the bandwidth is done. I find that most loan officers do not have a podcast. And those that do, that aren't trying to do coaching, their podcast is for consumers. Mine is not. Mine is specifically for the lender. So theirs are more consumers, like, should I pay off my credit card before I visit you, or how much down payment, right? And that's what they're doing with theirs. And that's what I'm encouraging my students to do, to create a podcast so that they can do the same, right? So that they can become that market influencer for clients, for getting business. Outside of my industry, the podcast itself had actually, it's called Mortgage Lending Mastery. It actually morphed into realtors listening to it. The loan officers encourage their realtors to listen to it because the content is basically the same, about how to grow a business. And then entrepreneurs started coming in, and then it morphed into not only professional development, but personal development. So I've had body language specialists, I've had procrastination psychologists on there because it's all related to business. And it's really turned into this personal and professional growth, which I absolutely love. And then that's expanded into me being asked to speak on women's things and, about business and about entrepreneurship. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's
you never know where it's
unintended consequences. Yeah. That's really great.
Yeah.
So I like for my listeners to hear about the real experiences of starting a podcast because, for the 80 some episodes that I've done of this podcast, it's been a lot of advice. It's been a lot of avoid this mistake, avoid that mistake. So I like to go back to the beginning. Even if it's with your son's podcast and the mistakes that maybe were made or the growing pains that you experienced, could you just share one that was like, wow, I'll never make that mistake again that you went through?
Gosh, I'm trying to think of some of them. I don't know that they're mistakes. I think they're just lessons learned. I don't think they're big mistakes. There's several of them. Unfortunately, when my son and I both started, how we have our intro and our intro, we used the same person, and that was fine. And I had his for a really long time, but when it came time to change, because I had to make some changes on some, the data on the intro,
right.
He passed away, and so we had to find somebody, right? And so I had to go to Fiverr, and it wasn't like outrageously expensive, but I made a lot of expensive mistakes in there. Picking someone on Fiverr, I can write your intro, and then they can't speak English, right? And it took a while to find somebody, and I found someone that I absolutely love, but I'm now moving from her as we speak. I'm moving from her because we're changing. I think one of the biggest challenges for me is that you making sure that your intro and intro is evergreen, right? That's probably the better word to use, is more evergreen so that you're not, that if you're going to change your products, your services, your programs, yourself, especially if you're, in my case as a loan officer, right? If I were a loan officer and I'm saying, hey, introducing Jen du Plessis with ABC Mortgage Company, you may not be with them. So that's very taxing. And I think that my listeners, and I've not heard from them, thankfully, they're so nice, but my subscribers, have never said anything, but I'm concerned that they, I get used to the noise and the not the noise, but the music, and I get used to that. And I have a fear of changing that up, where they're like, oh my gosh, is she changing again? So I would say that's probably one thing. And the other was, in the beginning, we tried to grow a tribe. He tried to grow a tribe online, and he subsequently did. I mean, he's about ready to sell his company for a little over $200 million. And it all started from a podcast and, grew from there. But we tried to grow our membership from it, and the way that we did it didn't go very well. So I would just say that, yes, you can grow your membership, but there's probably better ways to do it. And I would lend myself now, if I wanted to do that, I would be hiring other people to guide me to do it the most appropriate way and get the best results. Because we tried everything. We tried this membership and that membership, and you name it, we tried it, and it didn't work out very well. And ultimately he just decided not to do it. And he actually does a podcast every day now. He releases a podcast every day because he's in options trading. So he can talk about something every day. And just by the pure repetitiveness, people are naturally drawn. He just says, hey, come visit us at our website. And that's where he picks up his membership now. So I still don't have that figured out yet. So I would say that's an ongoing mistake. Right?
I think for a lot of people, for a lot of the clients that I work with, a lot of the people that are using a podcast as part of their platform, as part of the way of building a community, they've all struggled with membership or membership sites, or because they find out that, oh yeah, I want to grow this thing where I can speak to 1,000 people at the same time, or 10,000 people, 20,000 people at the same time, and I can monetize it, and it can be a small cost, so more people want to join. But then they don't realize that it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, take the content that you're creating for a podcast each week, and then you've got to provide more that's exclusive to those people, and then you've got to provide ways for them to learn, and then you've got to show up and give them access. And it's one of the things that a lot of content creators or creators in general, with if you've heard of Patreon, they deal with all the time, is the scalability of that. Providing benefits to the people that are supporting you in your art form or whatever, and being able to show up. Jen, I really appreciate you joining us. This has been some really great advice. If people want to find you, what's the best place to get your latest information and the things that you're working on now?
Yeah, the best place is just go to jendeplessis.com. That's my website, and you'll find all the information you need there. And if you want to, have a strategy session with me, if you're in the mortgage or real estate space and you're listening to this and you say, how should I implement it? That's an opportunity for us to have a breakthrough session. And, if you're also thinking about doing a podcast, then it's going to be great, because then we can circle back with Danny and have him do everything for you. Right?
Awesome.
Yeah. So I can help you with all the details and the content. He can help you with the technical.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great one.